The ship Aurora moved slowly through the dark space. Around it there was nothing but cold stars and the silent glow of distant suns. For weeks, the crew had seen nothing new. They had been searching for worlds where life might grow, but most of the planets they found were dry or frozen. The long journey was making everyone quiet. Captain Mira stood at the wide glass of the command deck and watched the stars slide past. She had seen many strange things in her years of travel, but today her thoughts were heavy. She wanted something new to appear, something that could wake the hearts of her crew and remind them why humans had come so far from their home world. The calm was broken when the soft voice of the ship computer called from the control panel. It said that a strange signal had entered their range. The signal was old, so old that the system almost ignored it as background noise, but a tiny part of the message had a shape inside it. It was not random. Tomas, the ship engineer, came quickly to the deck when he heard. He was a man who loved puzzles more than anything else. He started working with the signal, pulling away the static and broken sound. Soon shapes began to form on the display. First came lines of gold light that moved across the screen like flowing rivers. Then they joined to make a map. At the center of the map, there was a bright star. Around that star was a single planet drawn in a glow like the sun at dawn. A voice came with the image. The voice spoke in words that the translator could barely understand. It told of a place called El Dorado. A world was not metal, but life itself. The voice promised treasure beyond anything the mind could imagine, but also warned of a curse for those who tried to claim it. The message ended with a final image of a golden city shining so bright it almost hurt to look at. Then the screen went dark again. The crew sat in silence. No one spoke for a long moment. Myra broke the quiet. She asked what they knew of El Dorado. Tomas searched the records, but found only stories told by traders and old starship captains. They all spoke of gold cities hidden behind clouds and rivers that shone with light. They also spoke of ships that went to find them and never returned. Some of the crew felt uneasy. They said the map could be a trap left by someone who wanted to draw strangers into danger. Others felt the pull of the unknown. They had been out here for so long, and the thought of a place so strange was like a fire in their minds. Mira listened to both sides. She knew her people were tired of endless, empty space. She also knew that risk was part of why humans had crossed the stars in the first place. After a long pause, she decided they would follow the map. They would see El Dorado with their own eyes. The days that followed were filled with work. Thomas and the navigation team plotted the path from the map. It led them through a stretch of space no human ship had ever crossed. The area was thick with strange dust clouds that blocked long-range scans. At times, the dust made the stars seem to fade away, leaving them in a dark sea with no light to guide them, except the gold trail on the screen. The crew felt a strange change as they moved closer to the mark on the map. Some said they dreamed of rivers made of light. Others woke in the night with the taste of metal in their mouth. Even the ship itself seemed to hum softly, as if it could sense the pull of the planet ahead. On the seventh day, they passed the last dust cloud and saw the star from the map burning bright in the distance. Around it, a small shape moved slowly. It was the world of El Dorado. From far away, they could see that the planet was wrapped in a thick, shining mist. The clouds reflected the star's light in golden waves that rolled across its surface. No part of the land below could be seen. It looked like a dream made real. Mira stood on the deck and felt the quiet weight of the moment. She thought of the warning in the message. She thought of the ships that never came back. But she also thought of the truth that had carried humans through every age. If a path led into the unknown, there would always be someone who would walk it. The Aurora turned its nose toward the golden clouds and began its slow approach. The signal from the map had faded now, but its echo still seemed to beat in the hearts of all aboard. None of them knew if they would return. None of them knew if the treasure was real or only a story. But the pull of El Dorado was stronger than fear. In the silence of space, the ship moved forward into the light. The golden clouds grew larger in the ship's wide windows as the aurora came closer to the planet. They moved like slow waves in the sky, rolling and folding over one another. At times, they looked almost solid, as if a giant hand had shaped them into walls and towers. Light from the star above made them shine with a warm glow that touched every part of the ship's deck. The crew stood in silence, each person lost in their own thoughts. For some, the beauty of the clouds was a comfort. For others, it was a warning. Something so strange and perfect could not be without danger. Captain Mira gave the order to begin the descent. The ship lowered itself toward the thick mist. Instruments began to fail the moment they touched the edge of the golden cloud. Screens flickered and readings turned into meaningless lines. The ship's sensors could no longer see what was below. Tomas worked quickly at his station, trying to keep some control over the guidance system. He told Myra that the cloud was filled with particles like dust, but not dust as they knew it. It was metallic and light at the same time, and it was alive with tiny bursts of energy. It was almost like the mist wanted to hide the planet from machines. The closer they went, the darker it became. The golden glow dimmed until it was only a faint light around them. The crew had to guide the ship by eye. Slowly the clouds began to thin, and the shapes of the world below started to appear. They saw wide valleys covered in a strange grass that shone faintly, even in the shadow. Mountains rose in the distance, their slopes lined with ridges that caught the light and reflected it like mirrors. Rivers wound through the valleys, and their surfaces glimmered as though made of molten gold. The ship landed in an open field, near the edge of a valley. The grass bent under its weight, but the plants did not break. They seemed to sway back into place once the ship settled. Myra ordered the landing party to prepare. She chose 6 people to join her, including Tomas, the navigator Lena, and 3 others from the science team. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and warm air rushed inside. The first breath outside was unlike anything they had felt before. The air was heavy but not hard to breathe. It carried a sweet scent that was almost like honey mixed with metal. Each breath seemed to fill the body with strange energy, making their steps feel lighter. The ground was soft under their boots. The faint light in the grass made it seem as if they were walking on a field of stars. Small insects with wings like thin glass moved between the blades, leaving tiny trails of light in the air behind them. As they walked toward the valley, the golden clouds above shifted slowly, letting beams of sunlight fall through. The light touched the rivers, and the surface rippled with bright waves. It was beautiful, but also made the crew uneasy. The beauty here felt like it was watching them. They moved deeper into the valley and began to see signs of something made by hands. Small stones shaped into patterns lay half buried in the ground. Broken pillars stood in the grass, their surfaces covered with strange markings that shimmered faintly. Lena bent down to study the patterns. She said the lines were too even to be natural. They might be writing or symbols of a kind she had never seen. Tomas touched one of the stones and felt a faint hum beneath his hand, as if the rock still remembered something from the past. Far ahead, on the other side of the valley, they saw movement. At first, it seemed like the sunlight playing on the grass, but the shapes grew clearer. Figures were walking toward them. They were tall and slim, each one wearing armor that looked like flowing metal. The armor caught the sunlight and reflected it in waves of gold. The figures stopped at a distance and stood without speaking. The crew felt the weight of their gaze. Finally, one of the golden figures stepped forward. When it spoke, its voice was deep and slow, carrying an echo as if it came from a far place. It said that the humans had come to the place of the guardians. It said that this land was under a curse, and those who sought the treasure would carry the curse forever. The voice was calm, but also carried a warning. Myra stepped forward and told them they had come from far away. She said they were not here to steal, but to understand. The golden figure did not answer right away. It turned to the others, and they stood together in silence for a long moment. Then the leader told them to follow. The guardians led them toward the mountains. As they walked, the land began to change. The grass gave way to smooth stone paths that twisted and turned. Golden flowers grew along the edges, their petals opening and closing as if they were alive in a way more than plants. The path rose into the hills, and soon they could see what lay beyond. A great city spread out before them. Towers of gold reached high into the mist. Bridges hung between them like strands of light. The city seemed endless, and the air around it was alive with a faint song, like music carried on the wind. Tomas whispered that the structures could not be made from simple metal. They seemed to be grown, shaped over centuries by something that understood both life and stone. Mira felt the same thought rising in her mind. This was not a city built in the way humans built cities. This was something far older. The guardians stopped at the edge of the city and told them to enter only if they were ready to see the truth. The leader said once they crossed the gate, the city itself would decide if they were worthy to walk its halls. Myra looked at her crew. She saw the fear in their faces, but also the light of curiosity. She stepped forward first, passing under the tall golden arch that marked the gate. As soon as she crossed, she felt the ground shift under her feet. The air seemed to thicken, and the golden towers above leaned closer as if watching her every move. Behind her, the rest of the crew followed, each one feeling the strange pull of the city. The gates closed behind them without a sound. Ahead, the golden streets stretched into a maze that waited for their next step. The golden streets stretched ahead like rivers frozen in time. Each stone in the path glowed faintly, as if light was trapped inside it. The air was warmer here than in the valley, and it carried a strange humming sound that seemed to come from the walls around them. The crew walked slowly, taking in the city's beauty and mystery. Tall towers rose on each side, their smooth golden walls catching the sunlight that slipped through the mist above. The shapes of the towers were strange, bending and twisting in ways that seemed impossible for stone or metal. Some had bridges, connecting them high in the air, while others stood alone like watchful giants. The guardians walked ahead without looking back. Their armor shone brighter now, reflecting not only the sunlight but also the glow from the ground and walls. The leader carried no weapon, yet his presence felt as strong as an army. After some time, they reached an open square in the center of the city. The ground here was made of wide, flat plates that fit together like pieces of a puzzle. At the center stood a tall pillar shaped like a spear reaching toward the sky. The pillar pulsed with a slow golden light, and each pulse seemed to echo through the crew's bodies. The leader of the guardians turned to face them. His voice came deep and steady, filling the air as if it was part of the city itself. He said the place they stood in was called the Heart Court. It was where the city decided if strangers could go deeper. Myra asked what they had to do to earn that right. The leader replied that it was not the guardians who decided. The city itself would choose, for the city was alive. It was not only stone and gold, but a mind older than any star in the sky. As he spoke, the ground beneath their feet began to shift. The plates of gold moved apart, revealing glowing patterns beneath them. The hum in the air grew louder, and the crew felt a gentle pull, as if something unseen was drawing them forward. Tomas whispered that the patterns on the ground looked like a map, but the lines kept changing as if they were searching for something. Lena noticed that each crew member stood on a different part of the glowing design, and when she moved, the light under her feet changed. The leader of the Guardians told them this was the first test. Each person must find the place in the pattern where they belonged. Only then would the city open the path forward. If they failed, the city would close to them forever. Mira told her crew to move slowly and think carefully. She stepped off her place and tried another part of the pattern, but the light under her feet dimmed. She returned to her first spot, and the light grew brighter. One by one, the crew began to find where they were meant to stand. The pattern shifted and responded to them, glowing more when the match was right. After what felt like hours, all 7 stood in places where the light shone bright and steady. The hum in the air deepened, and the pillar at the center of the square began to glow more strongly. Then the ground stopped moving, and the patterns faded into solid gold again. The leader of the Guardians nodded. He said the city had accepted their first step, but he warned them that the next test would not be of their feet, but of their hearts and minds. They left the square and followed the Guardians deeper into the city. The streets narrowed here, winding between tall walls covered in carvings. The carvings showed scenes of great ships sailing through stars, of battles fought under strange suns, and of people who seemed half human and half light. Thomas stopped to study one of the carvings. He said the figures in it looked like the Guardians themselves, but there were also smaller shapes among them. These shapes had the faces of humans. Lena wondered aloud if humans had been here before. Long ago. The leader overheard them and said there had indeed been visitors from far away in the past. Some had come seeking wisdom, others seeking power. Those who came with greed left with nothing, and those who came with truth left changed forever. The crew finally reached a wide doorway shaped like the mouth of a cave. Golden light poured from inside, casting shifting patterns on the ground. The leader stopped and told them that beyond this door lay the Hall of Voices. In this hall, the city would speak to each of them. It would ask them questions without words, and their answers would be known without sound. Myra felt a chill at his words. She asked what would happen if the city did not like the answers. The leader replied that those who failed would not leave the hall. He did not explain further, and his silence made the crew uneasy. Still, they knew there was no turning back. They stepped through the doorway into a vast chamber. The walls here were lined with golden panels that shifted slowly like the surface of water. The floor was smooth and cool under their boots. At the far end of the hall stood 7 tall shapes, each made of pure light. One by one, the shapes moved toward them. When the first shape reached Myra, it stopped and began to change. In moments, it had taken the form of a person from her past. It was her father, though she knew it was not real. The figure spoke without sound, and she understood it as clearly as if she had heard the words. It asked why she had come so far from her home and what she truly sought. In another part of the hall, Thomas saw a figure from his childhood. Lena faced a version of herself from years ago with eyes full of hope and fear. Each crew member faced their own image, their own questions. Time passed without measure in the hall. At last, the light shapes returned to their places at the far end. The air grew still, and the golden panels on the walls began to glow in a slow rhythm. The leader of the Guardians entered the hall and looked at them one by one. He said the city had listened and the path forward would open. They had been found worthy for now, but the final choice still lay ahead. The crew followed the Guardians out of the hall into the misty streets once more. Above them, the golden cloud shifted, letting through a narrow beam of sunlight that touched the tallest tower. The city seemed to watch them more closely now, as if it knew their hearts. Somewhere deep within its shining walls, the treasure of Dorado waited. The golden streets narrowed into a single path that led between 2 tall walls. The walls shone softly, and the glow seemed to move like slow water. The crew followed the Guardians, their footsteps echoing in the still air. Soon the path opened into a long hall unlike anything they had seen before. It stretched far into the distance, with no sign of an end. The floor was smooth and bright, and the walls were lined with tall golden doors. Each door had carvings of stars, rivers, and strange creatures with wings of light. The leader of the guardians stopped and turned toward Myra. He said this was the Hall of Paths. Here the city would test not their strength or their memories, but their unity. Many visitors had walked into this hall, but few had reached the other side together. Before Myra could answer, the guardians stepped back into the mist and vanished. The crew was alone. Myra called for everyone to stay close. She walked to the first door on the right and touched its surface. It opened without sound, revealing a narrow passage. A warm light shone from somewhere deep inside. The crew stepped through, and the door closed quietly behind them. They now stood in another hall, but this one was different. The walls were lined with tall mirrors, and in each mirror they saw not themselves but scenes from different places. One mirror showed a forest with trees made of crystal. Another showed a wide desert under two suns. A third showed a city floating above the clouds. Thomas stepped closer to a mirror showing a vast ocean. As he reached out, the surface of the mirror rippled like water, and his hand passed through. Before anyone could stop him, the pull grew stronger, and he vanished into the image. The crew rushed to the mirror, but the ocean scene was gone. Now it only reflected the empty hall. Lena shouted his name, and the hall echoed her voice. Then, to their left, another door appeared where none had been before. Myra led the way, knowing they had no choice but to follow where the city wanted them to go. The new passage was shaped like a spiral, winding downward. The air grew warmer, and a faint sound of rushing water reached their ears. At the bottom, they stepped into a chamber filled with golden mist. In the center was a pool, and beside it stood Thomas, unharmed but looking dazed. He said he had walked along the shore of an endless ocean. The sky there was filled with strange birds that glowed like fire. He had heard whispers calling his name, telling him to follow the water to the heart of the city. Before he could answer, the golden mist had drawn him here. They left the chamber together, but now the halls began to change around them. The walls shifted when they looked away, and passages appeared where there had been none. Sometimes they walked in a straight line for what felt like minutes, only to find themselves back where they had started. Lena noticed that the light on the floor grew brighter when they stayed together and dimmer when they spread apart. She told everyone to walk in a tight group. Slowly, the halls began to guide them forward. After a long time, they came to a wide hall with no roof. Above them, the golden clouds swirled in slow circles, and the tallest towers of the city rose into the mist. In the center of the hall was a platform with 7 steps. On the top step stood a tall golden arch. The air here was heavy with the same hum they had felt before, but now it was stronger. The hum seemed to match the beating of their hearts. As they climbed the steps, the arch began to glow. Shapes appeared in the light, forming symbols that none of them had seen before. The symbols shifted until they formed an image of the crew standing together. Then the image split into 7 separate figures, each standing alone. A deep voice filled the air. It told them this was the second test of the Hall of Paths. The city wanted to know if they would choose the same path together or take different roads alone. If they stayed as one, they would face greater danger but also greater reward. If they walked apart, they might find safety, but they would never reach the heart of El Dorado. Myra looked at her crew. She knew the risk of staying together, but she also knew they had survived only because they had trusted one another. She spoke clearly and said they would remain as one. The arch responded by brightening until the light was almost too much to bear. Then a door formed within the light, and the voice told them to step through. On the other side, they found themselves in a vast corridor with walls so high they could not see the top. The walls were alive with movement. Streams of golden light flowed through channels carved into the stone, running like rivers. The air was warm and filled with a faint music, as if the city itself was singing. The corridor twisted and turned. But unlike before, the path did not close or shift. It guided them onward until they reached a chamber with no visible ceiling or floor. They stood on a bridge that seemed to hang in empty space. Below and above, the golden streams moved in endless patterns, crossing and merging like living threads. In the center of the bridge stood a single guardian, taller than any they had seen before. His armor was brighter, and the light around him seemed to bend toward his shape. He spoke in a voice that was both calm and powerful. He said they had passed the test of unity, but the city still watched them. Before they could claim the treasure, they would need to prove not only their courage, but also the truth in their hearts. He pointed to a wide door at the far end of the bridge. Beyond it, he said, lay the inner halls where the city would show them what it truly was. The crew crossed the bridge together, the golden light wrapping around them like a living thing. Behind them, the guardian vanished into the glow, and the hum of the city grew stronger. Ahead, the door waited, and behind that door lay the heart of El Dorado. The door before them was tall and smooth. It had no handle, no carvings, and no visible opening. Yet it glowed softly, as if it was waiting. Mira stepped forward and placed her hand against it. The surface felt warm, and the hum of the city grew, louder, matching the rhythm of her heartbeat. Without a sound, the door began to part in the middle. Golden light spilled out, bathing the crew in a warm glow. The air beyond was thick and still, carrying the faint scent of the sweet metallic air they had breathed since they landed. They stepped inside and found themselves in a wide circular chamber. The walls were smooth gold, but not solid. They moved like liquid, shifting and rippling with slow grace. At the center of the room stood a massive sphere of pure light and gold, floating just above the ground. The sphere pulsed gently, each pulse sending a wave of soft light across the chamber. No guardian stood here, only the sphere and the sound of the city's heartbeat. Lena stepped closer, eyes wide. She said it was not just light. Inside the sphere, she could see shapes moving, stars, planets, and rivers of silver that looked like entire galaxies. The shapes shifted as they watched, forming patterns that felt both familiar and strange. Thomas whispered that it was alive. Not in the way a creature is alive, but like a memory that thinks. Then, without warning, the crew felt something touch their minds. It was not a voice, but they understood it as clearly as if it spoke. The sphere was the heart of El Dorado, the source of the golden light and the keeper of all that had ever been. It was made by the first builders of the city, a people who had long before the birth of the human race. Sphere told them it carried the complete memory of its creators, their history, their knowledge, their victories, and their mistakes. Anyone who took it would gain this memory. They would see the rise and fall of countless worlds. They would understand truths hidden from all others. But there was a cost. The cost was never-ending memory. Whoever carried the sphere would never be free from it. Every thought and feeling of those ancient lives would live inside their mind forever. There would be no rest from it, not in dreams, not in silence. The sphere asked them if they had the courage to accept this burden. It said that many before had taken it, and none had returned to their home worlds. The crew stood in silence. The light of the sphere touched each of their faces, and they could see the conflict in one another's eyes. Lena stepped back, shaking her head. She said she could not carry such a thing. The weight of her own life was enough. Tomas looked torn. The thought of holding the knowledge of an ancient race was more tempting than anything he had ever known. But he also feared losing himself inside it. Myra stepped closer to the sphere. She remembered every step of their journey. The golden clouds, the living city, the guardians, and the endless halls. She thought about the warning in the first message they had received. It was not about greed for gold, but about the weight of truth. She spoke aloud, even though the sphere did not need sound to hear her. She said that humans had crossed the stars because they could not stop asking questions. They had faced dangers that could have ended them, but they had gone on. If the burden of memory could guide them, even if it cost her peace, then it was worth the price. The sphere's light grew brighter, filling the chamber until it felt like the sun had risen inside. Mira closed her eyes, and the warmth wrapped around her. She felt the first wave of memory enter her mind. Images of vast cities floating between stars, of beings made of light shaping worlds with their hands, of battles fought not for power, but to protect life itself. She saw the first builders creating the sphere, knowing their time was ending. They had poured their entire history into it, hoping that one day someone would come who could carry it forward. The flood of memory did not stop. It went on and on. Millions of lives, moments of joy and loss, discoveries that changed entire civilizations. She felt herself being stretched thin, as if her mind was becoming a vast ocean. The crew stepped back as the light from the sphere flowed into her. They could see faint shapes moving around her, shadows of people who were not there, voices that had been silent for ages. When the light finally dimmed, Mira stood still with her eyes closed. She opened them slowly, and the crew saw something new in her gaze. It was not only the eyes of their captain anymore. There was an ancient depth there, as if she had lived 1,000 lifetimes in the space of a breath. The sphere's glow faded, and it sank gently to the ground. It no longer floated. Its work was done. The chamber grew silent again, but the hum of the city was softer now, almost like a sigh. Mira turned to her crew and told them they had to leave. The city had given them its heart, and now it would let them go. As they walked back toward the door, the golden wall shifted, forming a path for them. No guardians blocked their way. The city's light followed them through the halls, as if watching them one last time. When they stepped outside, the golden clouds above parted just enough for a beam of sunlight to touch Mira. She stood in the light for a moment, her face calm, but her eyes filled with the weight of what she now carried. The crew did not speak as they made their way back to the Aurora. The air seemed warmer, the grass brighter, and the rivers more alive. Yet everything felt changed, as if the planet itself knew what had happened. They boarded the ship, and the engines came to life. Slowly, the Aurora rose into the sky, climbing back toward the stars. Below them, the golden mist closed again, hiding El Dorado from sight. Mira stood at the viewing glass, her hands clasped behind her back. She could feel the memories inside her, 1,000 voices whispering, 1,000 eyes seeing. It was a burden she had chosen, and she would carry it for the rest of her life. But somewhere deep inside, she felt a quiet hope. Perhaps the curse could become a gift. Perhaps humanity could bear it and use it to walk a better path among the stars. The ship turned toward open space, and the journey home began. The Aurora moved through space at steady speed, leaving the golden clouds of El Dorado far behind. Inside the ship, the crew worked in silence. The excitement of discovery had faded into quiet thought. Each person carried their own memories of the planet, but only Mira carried the weight of its heart. She spent long hours alone in her cabin, standing at the viewing glass and watching the stars pass. At first, the crew thought she was simply resting, but in truth, she was listening. The voices of the sphere still spoke in her mind, each one a fragment of the ancient builders' lives. They told her of distant worlds, lost civilizations, and dangers that had destroyed them. Sometimes the voices argued with one another, their words mixing into a tide of thought that pulled at her from all sides. But beneath the noise, there was also clarity. Threads of knowledge began to connect. She could see how the builders had shaped their world and why they had left the sphere behind. On the third day of travel, Tomas came to her cabin. He asked if she was well. She turned to him and said she was more than well, but she was also not the same as before. She spoke in a calm voice, yet there was something deeper in her tone, as if 100 people spoke through her at once. Tomas admitted that the crew was worried. She had barely spoken since they left El Dorado. He asked if the burden was too heavy. Myra shook her head. She said it was not heavy, it was vast. She compared it to standing on the shore of an endless sea, with waves of knowledge crashing. A person could drown in it, but they could also learn to swim. That evening, Myra called the crew together in the main hall. She told them what the voices had shown her. The builders of El Dorado had seen the rise and fall of countless worlds. They had watched as greed and fear destroyed civilizations more powerful than anything humans had yet built. They had created the sphere to pass on not just knowledge, but warnings. She told them the builders had believed in one truth above all, that no world can survive if it closes itself off from others. Trade, learning, and trust between worlds were the only way life could last in the long dark of space. Some of the crew asked what that meant for them. Myra said it meant that humanity had to choose now, before they became another lost voice in the sphere's endless memory. They could take what they had learned and share it, helping other worlds, or they could hide it and risk repeating the same mistakes. The crew was silent. Lena was the first to speak. She said that if they shared this knowledge, it could change everything. Some would welcome it, but others might see it as a threat. Tomas added that there were powers in the galaxy that would do anything to control such knowledge. Myra nodded. She said the danger was real, but so was the chance to make something better. The builders had given her the sphere because they believed humans could bear it. If they failed to try, then the curse would remain only a curse. If they tried, the curse could become a gift. In the days that followed, the change in Myra became clearer. She no longer needed the ship's navigation system to chart a course. She knew the positions of stars from the memories in her mind. When the ship's engine developed a fault, she repaired it using methods the crew had never seen before. She began teaching them small pieces of what she had learned, speaking of energy sources that could power a city for centuries and farming, methods that could feed entire worlds without harming the land. The crew listened with a mix of awe and fear. They could see the weight she carried, but also the strength it gave her. One night, Lena came to Myra and asked if she was ever afraid of losing herself in the memories. Myra admitted that she was. There were moments when the voices grew so loud that she could not tell her own thoughts from theirs. But each time, she remembered why she had chosen this path, not for herself, but for the future of her people. A week into their journey, the Aurora entered a region of space known for pirate attacks. Ships in this area often vanished without a trace. The crew was tense, but Myra remained calm. She changed the ship's course without explanation, guiding them through a narrow stretch between two dead moons. When they emerged, they received a signal from a nearby station warning of a pirate fleet ahead, right where their old course would have taken them. The crew realized Myra had known without being told. She had seen it in the memories of the builders, who had once crossed this same path long ago. After that, no one doubted her. They began to trust that the burden she carried might truly be a blessing. Still, not all moments were easy. There were nights when Myra could not sleep, her mind filled with images of dying worlds. She saw cities falling into the sea, skies filled with fire, and people lost to time. She felt the grief of the builders as if it were her own. But each morning, she stood with her crew and spoke with steady voice. She told them that fear was not the enemy, surrender was. As long as they moved forward, there was hope. As the Aurora drew closer to human space, The question of what to do with the knowledge became more urgent. Thomas suggested they take it only to trusted leaders. Lena thought they should share it openly, so no one could claim it for themselves. Others worried that the truth could tear apart the fragile peace between human worlds. Mira listened to them all. She said the final decision would be made when they reached home, but in her heart, she already knew her choice. She would not hide what she carried. The builders had trusted her because humans had the stubbornness to face danger and keep walking. She would honor that trust. On the final night before entering home space, Mira stood alone in the viewing hall. She looked out at the stars, feeling both the weight of the past and the pull of the future. She knew the road ahead would be hard. There would be those who feared what she brought, and those who wanted to control it. But she also knew something the builders had not known. That humanity's greatest strength was not its power, but its will to rise again after every fall. That was the human decision, and she had made it. The next day, the Aurora crossed the border into human space, carrying the light of El Dorado in the mind of its captain. The Aurora entered human space under a sky of clear starlight. The familiar blue and white glow of their home planet hung far ahead. The crew felt a wave of relief. After all they had faced, they were finally home. But their return was not the end. It was the beginning of something much greater. Captain Mira stood on the viewing deck, her hands resting on the rail. The memories of the builders whispered inside her mind, showing her visions of countless worlds. She knew what waited for them on the surface. There would be questions, fear, and doubt. Some would welcome her gift, while others would see it as a danger. The ship sent its landing request to the central station. Within minutes, they received orders to dock. As they approached, Mira could see the lights of the station shining against the black of space. Shuttles moved in and out, and large transport ships drifted nearby. When the Aurora docked, a group of officials waited. They wore dark uniforms with silver bands, the mark of the Planetary Council. One of them, an older man with sharp eyes, stepped forward. He welcomed them back but wasted no time in asking about their mission. Mira told him they had found El Dorado. She did not mention the sphere yet. The man's eyes narrowed. He said they had heard of the Golden Planet only in stories. If she was telling the truth, it would be the greatest discovery in years. The council ordered her and the senior crew to attend a private meeting. In a large room lined with glass walls, Mira told them everything: the golden clouds, the living city, the guardians, and finally, the heart of El Dorado. She spoke of the sphere and the knowledge it carried, and the burden it placed on her mind. The room fell silent. Some of the council looked in awe, others in suspicion. One of them, a woman with a calm but firm voice, asked if she was willing to give the sphere to the council for study. Mira told them she could not. The sphere had chosen her. It was not a tool to be locked away in a vault. It was meant to be shared. This caused an argument. Some council members said the knowledge could lead to great progress. Others warned it could also destroy everything if misused. Mira listened, then said that hiding it would be the greatest danger of all. Word of her return spread quickly through the station. Journalists, traders, and travelers gathered near the Aurora, trying to learn the truth. Rumors filled the air. Some said she had found endless gold, others that she had discovered a weapon from an ancient race. Mira spoke to the virus that she had discovered a weapon from an ancient race. Mira spoke to the virus public from the main hall of the station. Her voice was steady as she told the story of El Dorado. She said it was not a place of gold for greed, but a place of memory and warning. She told them the builders had left their history so others could avoid their mistakes. At first, the crowd was quiet. Then questions came all at once. Could this knowledge end hunger? Could it bring new energy sources? Could it cure sickness? Mira answered as much as she could. She promised that what she carried would be given freely to all who would use it for good. Her words spread across the human colonies. Some leaders welcomed her promise. Others feared it, worrying that the balance of power would change. But Myra had expected this. She began teaching openly, starting with methods the builders had used to grow food and create clean energy. Within weeks, stations and planets began to see changes. Farms produced more crops with less land. Small settlements received power that would last for decades without harm to the environment. Trade grew between distant worlds. Still, there were those who resisted. A small alliance of worlds demanded that the knowledge be controlled only by governments. They claimed that, if it spread too freely, it could fall into dangerous hands. Myra called for a gathering of leaders from across human space. She spoke to them of the builders' final lesson, that isolation and control had destroyed many great civilizations. She reminded them that humanity had survived by standing together, even in its darkest times. Her words did not convince everyone, but they planted a seed. Over the months that followed, more worlds began to work together, sharing the knowledge she had brought. Slowly, the alliance of resistance weakened. The burden on Myra's mind never lessened. The voices and memories of the builders were always with her, but she no longer felt alone in carrying it. Each day, more people learned from her, and more of the burden was passed on as living knowledge. One evening, as the Aurora prepared for another journey, Thomas asked her why she continued to travel when she could stay and guide from one place. She smiled and said the builders had not given her this gift so she could stand still. There were other worlds, other civilizations, and other voices waiting to be heard. The crew gathered once more on the deck. The ship's engines came alive, and the stars stretched before them like a road. Myra looked out at the endless dark. Feeling the familiar mix of weight and hope, she thought of the day they had first seen the golden clouds, of the city that watched them, and of the choice she had made in that quiet chamber. The curse of El Dorado was still with her, but it had become something else. It was no longer a burden to be feared. It was a light to guide the way. As the Aurora left human space once more, messages from allied worlds came in, each one a sign that the path forward was growing brighter. Myra knew there would always be challenges, and that the voices in her mind would never fade. But she also knew that humanity was ready to walk with her into whatever lay ahead. The stars waited, and humanity was no longer walking alone.